the pleasure of learning from half this panel, so that's really kind of cool to see you guys all here. But my question is kind of, the mainstream media is so affected by stuff that's been influenced from comic books. I mean, the movies, video games, every child knows Spider-Man whether or not they've ever picked up a Spider-Man comic. In a way, though, as far as mainstream sense, it's kind of the Conan O'Brien of the literary world, where everybody says they love them, but nobody watches the show. Why is that? And I guess, how can, from an academic standpoint, that really get changed?
In the short time, excuse me, in the short time I've been in comics, there's been a seismic shift in how comics are looked at in mainstream media. It used to be, and you still get a little glimpse of it here and there, where the headline for Iron Man 2's piece in LA Times will be "Biff Bam Pow, comics aren't for kids anymore." That's mostly gone away. I mean, I see, in my opinion, comic books treat themselves like a bastard stepchild than most people now treat them. And I and a lot of my friends are working towards, no, stop it. We're equal, if not better than, or not greater than, in influence on culture than anything that's out there. Nothing gets stolen more than from comics. The end, that's it. So just start acting the part. And no one in comics education or in the practical, application of them are acting the part. So start acting the part. If you got to dress up like Grant Morrison, dress up like Grant Morrison. If you want to be the crazy wizard like Alan Moore, be the crazy wizard. Whatever it is, act the part, And as far as the, so that is going away. But the other part of it is that we are still a literary medium, and people don't read. They don't read anything. A massive, gigantic part of this country doesn't read anything. But the people who read comics love to read. They love to read comics. And I mean, I'm very hyperly aware of this. And they're addicted to it, and they get it, and it's all consuming. So I choose to embrace that aspect of it and push outwards from it, than let myself be, to let it crumble me. The fact that that I'm writing and people don't read, So I mean, look at the hard numbers of actual books and the hard numbers of actual magazines and newspapers and comics. And comics are the only ones on the upswing. People still read them. They are absolutely the one that will survive and be the king of the digital revolution. Because if you have an iPad, I have one. If you see the comic page on the iPad, it is glorious. It is fantastic. It is not a hardship to read. So I mean, these are the problems. We have to stop treating ourselves like we're second-class citizens of the world, because we're not. You know what? You know who? And Stan Lee, man. The guy acts like, yeah, shit, I created all this shit. That's right. And stands up there and goes, yeah, man, I'm Disney. Suck it, That's the way he should. That's the way he should be. Take a bow, man. You did it,
And actually, he did it from the beginning. I mean, I think in many ways, one of the things that is so wonderful about Stan for me is that he talked that way when nobody else did.
Yep.
And I know that there's a sort of a carnival barker hucksterism thing going on there, but then when he was, I think, a whole generation, that following generation of people in the 1970s, because it didn't all start with Alan Moore. There are people like Steve Gerber, and I mean, there's some really exciting stuff happening in the 70s by people who are trying to push the boundaries of what is still thought of, especially with superhero comics, as a kid's form. And they're doing that because Stan told them it was okay to do that. Because Stan would talk about Jack Kirby and Shakespeare in the same breath. He had no problems with making those kinds of comparisons. And I think that's as big a legacy in some ways as the. I mean, he took this stuff seriously when nobody else did.
Yeah, he gives on the cover of Rolling Stone, and it was the Hulk, but it was still him.
And actually going from university to university. I mean, that was another thing that Stan was really good about that I hope doesn't go away. I mean, for me, my fear, if the fear of comics getting the respect that they have always deserved as what I genuinely think is the highest form of human artistic achievement. I mean, I really believe this. There are comics and certain forms of music move me more than anything else I spend any time with. But if they were to start getting the credit that they have always merited, it might get really hard to email somebody and say, "Will you come to my class?" And that would be a loss, because there's nothing, for the students, it's astonishing to actually meet somebody who's in that world and who
Well,
does
if that happens, a lot of really good things happen beforehand, so
Right.
you should focus on the good
I'll be
things
dead
in
before
there.
that happens.
I'd like to take a small tangent if we can. Maybe it's a big tangent too, because the source of your question involves basic issues of literacy, right? And as Brian was just saying a little bit ago, there's a lot of cultural hand-wringing over, well, nobody reads. And there's you know some quibbling we can do with that as well. Like, well, what does it mean to read actually, and what is the difference between consumption and readership? And that's something way bigger than we need to discuss in here right now, probably. But I think it is important to understand that there never was a golden moment where everybody in Western culture or Eastern culture or whichever culture you want to talk about, there wasn't a golden moment where everybody read.
No.
These are class issues. The people who got to read, the people who got to create art, the people who had their work distributed and circled around have always been powerful, they've always been rich, and they've always been well known. That isn't changing. What is changing is the kind of conversations. We have a very high literacy rate in here where we can start asking these kinds of questions, but the class issues are still definitely there. Because they're the issues like, well, if you have, let's face it, why aren't people reading? Because they're fucking working. Right? Sorry, one cat wrote, but they are. They're working. They're working people. And so if you don't have a lot of time to consume and read and think and write and make art, then you have, you have very limited resources. And so what are you supposed to focus on? That's where like the cultural agency of the academy is partly useful, but then also really problematic, because there's a sort of list. Read this and then you're a human being.
I think part of the problem too is that when you say people don't read, they don't want to read a lot of postmodernist, ironic fiction, which has no heart, no emotional center, and has no ethics at all, no interest in ethics. That's why I've started teaching fantasy, because fantasy, it seems to me, does talk about the metaphysical, does talk about the ethical, and talks about things that are very close to people's hearts, but in a lot of postmodernist fiction, it's a lot of game playing. And I think that's quite unfortunate. Who would want to read that anyway?
I stand up for the unethical game-playing wankers, actually.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to your class issue, and then we'll take your question. One of the great things about comics, again, Trev is right, that art in our culture and in years past, art has been the preserve of the moneyed. And the whole thing with comics is that it's like never been that way. It's an art form that anybody can do. With a pen and a piece of paper, you're off and running. And really, if you look at the history of comics, it started out as a outlaw kind of an art form anyways. I mean, the original publishers were out-of-work porn publishers who, were coming back and jumping on the bandwagon of the superhero.
Still going on, by the way.
And yeah. So, I just want to throw that out.